Hi, teammates all around the world. This is Sean J. McCall, and thank you for coming to this edition of Let's Talk. And that's what we're going to do. I am not big on grandiose introductions, so we're going to hop right into it so we have more time to talk to my guest. And that's what you all are here for anyway. So let me add him to the fray. One of my players is in the chat. So did it go through? There we go. There we go. EJ.
There we go. Sean, how are you?
What's good, man? I appreciate you coming on. Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
So we're gonna jump right into it. And can you do me a favor and just introduce yourself really briefly, and then we'll get started with the questions right away.
Yeah, I'm Ej Kusnyer, NBA, FIBA agent. Played college basketball at Mercer University. Played 5 years professionally overseas. Represented myself for 4 of those 5 years, and then transitioned into being an agent. So this is my 10th year as an agent, helping represent players. And there's I'm passionate about it, probably because my experience having been on the other side.
Yes. We're going to get to that, and I appreciate the way you think about that, because that's also why I do what I do with helping players, because I know what it's like, and I know there's not a lot of people out there willing to help without having a handout. So
100%. 100%.
So that's why I appreciate you coming on, because that's one thing that drew me to you when I found your page, how authentic you were, and yeah, also just the whole agent business itself. I'm seriously interested in that. Not to be an agent myself, but like I guess I can ask the first question. So me myself, I could not imagine to be an agent, because for one, I don't want the responsibility of not finding somebody a job.
Yeah.
Like a guy with a family and stuff like that. How did you get the first idea to become an agent?
Well, I think when I was finished playing, I didn't know what I wanted to do, right? I think as like athletes, basketball players in general, like your identity is so tied up in I hoop, or I'm a basketball player. And then it was over, and it was over before I thought it would be over. So I was back home, you know, I was married. I'm still married, and we had I have 4 kids, but we had our first child. So I was like, man, what do I do? What do I do now? What's next? And so I sent out probably like 50. Find out what I wanted to do next, right? Was that something where, did I want to coach? Did I want to train? I knew I wanted to stay in the sports world, right? I wanted to, potentially work with athletes. My dad was in the shoe industry for 30 years, so I watched him get to work with athletes and colleges. So I always thought, man, that's pretty sweet if you could stay in this. And yeah, one of the people that kind of responded back to me was an agent, and it was an agent that that I had tried to work with during my career, and he was very nice about it. He was like, I can help you, I can be here as like a sounding board, but I just wasn't at the level of the clientele that he was trying to get.
Right.
And so his response back to me was like, hey, can I learn more about the agent business? What do you think? He was like, listen, you did a better job for yourself than I would have been able to do for you. So I'm intrigued about you maybe coming to the side of things. And I said, well, I kind of sat down with my wife, and I was thinking of all the reasons why I didn't want to be an agent, because again, wasn't really a fan of agents as a player. And she was like, well, maybe those are all the reasons you should do it. And she said that, but she was also kind of like, here we go. We just got off this roller coaster of being a professional basketball player. Now we're going to launch ourselves into the uncertainty of the agent world. Great. But, it was a situation where he basically said, I'll give you a percentage of everything you bring in, no expenses, no salary. And so I was teaching PE and waiting tables to kind of start off that first year.
That's a good combination.
Yeah. And so, I had to support my family. So it was like, I remember that first year as an agent, he was like, yeah, he's like, how much money do you need to make? And at the time I was like, man, I need to make if I can make $30,000, like that would be enough. And I remember we met at, like, we were talking about it almost a year in, and he was like, "How much have you made?" And I was like, "Man, like negative 3,500." You know, like because fees were late, and he was like, "Oh my gosh." And so it was one of those things where um it was really tough at the beginning, but I'm very glad that I went through
Mhm.
that, because I think you know what I've learned now being in the business on that side for 10 years is that people that come into the business that don't have to kind of earn it, um number one, they're not very good, and then number two, um you know, they're not, they shouldn't be in the business, right? Like you got to be able to make money.
You gotta
It's
pay your
like,
dues.
and I think, yeah, you have to pay your dues. You have to, absolutely. And so I think I honestly, like, I worked for that guy for 2 years, and like there was one of the reasons I left, there was like a sense of like probably resentment that I wasn't getting anything paid for, and then I was just having to do it kind of all on my own. But then it's like once you get out of that and you start your own thing, and now you're in the position I was in, his position, I
Right.
had a great deal of empathy for him, and like have since like gone to him and been like, "Hey man, like I'm sorry. Like I apologize. Like I'm very now thankful for how you kind of raised me into this business."
Yeah, that's dope. Let's go back a little bit to your time at Mercer. Um, what were those years like, and when did you start thinking about the possibility of playing overseas?
So it was probably in between my junior and senior year when I felt like it could be a possibility.
Right.
I went on a tour with Athletes in Action, and we went to Katowice, Poland, and Berlin,
Hmm.
Germany. And so, you know, got to play with other college guys, but it kind of, we played like a Polish, Polish team, first division Polish team. Then like they put a group of Polish guys together. We played them. We played Alba Berlin's like junior team.
Hmm.
But we played like 4 or 5 games, and I met some people on that trip, some Americans. Guy Jeremiah Boswell, who's now shooting coach for the Orlando Magic, um, and really got to like be able to pick people's brains. And there was another guy, David Mons, who that summer at team camp, he was like back from playing overseas, and he was like working the clock in the book to make some like extra money. And I got to sit with him like all day for like, I don't know, 2, 3 days. And I must have asked him 1,000 questions. He was probably like, "Man, why did they put me with this guy?" And he was so insightful, and he gave me a lot of confidence that like, yeah, you can do it, and here's kind of the steps, and here's what you
Hmm.
need to do, and here's what kind of season you'll need to have next year, and here's how to kind of operate um as a pro. Here's how it works, because even back then, I mean, even have like go when I found um your Instagram, I was like, man, this is amazing, because there's just like not enough good information out there for
No, there
players,
really
whether it be
isn't.
the NBA, whether it be overseas. There's not enough good information. And so if you don't know somebody, and then the thing is,
Exactly.
you might know somebody, and they may have been given the wrong information. They may be feeding you the wrong information.
Hmm.
Um, so it's difficult. And then picking an agent and figuring out that piece of it, right, was like, who do you trust,
Right.
and who's going to do a good job, and you realize like you don't really know until you know.
Yep. How did you pick your very first agent? Well,
So my very first, it was
your only agent
my
as a
only
player
agent.
then, right?
Yeah, it was through Jeremiah. So Jeremiah introduced me. It was Garrett Kirsten Teal. So I was
Yeah, I
with
know Garrett.
yeah,
Yeah.
Scores First, and Garrett was great, like really good guy, good agent. It's funny, I was with him at the G League Showcase last year, and he's like, you always talk about agents and how bad that you're not. I was like, no, 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 no. I was like, I want to be clear. Like, I had a great experience with you, maybe not his Dutch partner, but with him specifically, yes. And I even use that as like a tool now. Is that I think I had I go back and look at emails that I was sending to him my first year as a rookie, and I'm just like, man, like I was an idiot. Like this is, I had such
Were
a
your
different respect.
expectations too high? Yeah.
Expectations. I didn't have the self-awareness So it was like I was on a bad team putting up really good numbers. And it's like if I could go back and talk to myself back then, I'd say, shut up. You're you're playing like when I say this now, you're gonna be like, yeah, duh. But at the time you don't know because you don't know. And so I was
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
playing 25, 30 minutes a game. I was fifth in the Dutch league in scoring, but we were, we were last
Mhm.
place. And our coach was like, he wasn't a real coach. I remember one game we're playing and he's yelling at us to run the press break. And I'm like, what? Wait, we've never worked on a
Never.
press break. And, and he's like, it's in the notebook. And I'm like, what notebook? Like, this is the middle of the game. This isn't like a timeout. The notebook. And so, like, I remember he had given us a folder with like plays and all these different things. And I was like, wait, so like, we never practiced
Mhm,
any of it. So
mhm.
it was like, wait, so I'm supposed to like remember what was in this packet that you gave us that had like 100 pages, what the press break was that we've never worked on. Usually you get that, you're going over it, something you can
Right,
review.
right.
Um, but just like situations like that all year where it'd be like, all right, this situation, it'd be like this guy's gonna set a pin down, and I'm like, all right, what if he's not open? Like, what's our secondary?
None of that.
What are we looking for? Whatever, and he'd
None
be
of that.
like, just play, and I'm like, well, just
Shot
play,
clock is running
like,
down. Get a shot
yeah,
off.
yeah. So, but in retrospect, I took that so personal, and I was like, man, this guy's an idiot, and I'm meeting with like management and like the Dutch, like understanding cultures too. Like the
Mhm,
Dutch are so
mhm.
non-confrontational, so they're like, "Oh man, EJ, yes, we understand." Okay, and meanwhile, they're like, "Man, we got to get this guy out of here. Like he's an idiot, right?" Like, and it's like now looking back on it, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I handled it the
Mhm.
complete wrong way."
Right.
And obviously that definitely affected my path after that and how hard I had to work to get back. Because as you know, that overseas it's the ladder, and if you fall down a rung,
Yeah,
you got to work twice as hard to get back to the rung that you were at,
yeah,
and then and to get even above that.
yeah. Um, shout out to your wife. Your wife's name is Jen, right?
Yeah,
So shout out to your wife for convincing you to be an agent.
yeah.
Um, so you had your first child while you were overseas, right?
So she was born in May, like in between my fourth and fifth year.
Oh, okay.
So my wife, so I was playing in Australia, and that season was we got there in January, we left in August. So I got this deal in Hungary. So I flew, talk about jet lag. I flew from Australia to the US for like a day and then straight to Hungary. Um, and my wife loved Australia so much, she was like, well, I'm going to stay here for a couple more days.
Bye.
And then she was coming home and she was going to stay in the States because her sister was getting married. And so she's staying in the States and she's probably home for, I don't know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I'm in Hungary and she calls me and she says, I'm pregnant. Right. So, like, super exciting um, news, but like we couldn't celebrate
Right,
together. We're doing this on Skype at the
right.
time. Um, And then, I just posted those videos about that whole story about like getting her over there and flying her over there. So I didn't see her until December of that year. So she's like 4 months pregnant at that point. She stayed for 2 months and then flew back home because it was after 28 weeks. At the time, you weren't supposed to be
Right.
flying. Um, and then our daughter Ava was born in May, and I actually had the team release me. I did get them to release me right before the playoffs, like May, because she was due like May, the first week of May, and of course, I leave. Team lets me go. I give up half of a salary,
Mhm.
and then she doesn't come till the 28th. So I could have, I could have finished the season. I could have played through the
But
playoffs.
it
You know,
always comes different than how you imagine it. So I
100%. Yes.
first of all, I gotta definitely shout out your post that you put up about representing yourself and that story with your wife and getting her over. That was pretty slick. So if anybody watching this, please hit up EJ's page and watch his last, I think, three reels about how it was representing himself and that story. That's a great story. I'm not going
Yeah.
to spoil it for anybody right now, but that's a really great story. So the reason why I asked about that was how did married life and then about to have a kid and things like that, how did that influence your decision making?
Oh, it was everything. I always tell people that um, professional basketball is a single man's
Yeah.
game unless you have like a very supportive partner,
Yeah.
wife, um, because they're living it with you. And my wife was she was great because she was like, listen, this has been your dream since you were like
Mhm.
whatever, since you can remember. So like I'm gonna support it. I know it's not forever, right? Like there's a
Right.
time when this will be over. And that last year, I think it was like I had a foot injury. I ended up getting cut. I I finished. I ended up going to Spain. Her and my daughter went home. Um, but it was like one of those situations where like it was just time. Like
Yeah.
Like I think when I tried to stretch it out. I was like, I'm gonna go to Spain. And I'm gonna play well, and I'm gonna get back to Hungary next year. And she was like, okay, well we're gonna go back to the States. And I'm like, all right, well, let's see how this short term contract goes. And I was in Spain for probably a week and I was like, I'm done.
Mhm.
I finished 2 months, but I knew that it was over because I think once you like once you have a wife, like that's more important than basketball.
Mhm.
Then you have a child, that's more important than basketball. You just start putting things that are ahead of basketball. And if you go down the line and you say, like, this is not good for my wife or my marriage, this is not good for, me as a father, then
Right.
like if you can't get to the basketball part, but if it's like, hey, I'm providing, I'm making X amount of dollars, I wouldn't be able to make that if I was
Right.
at home. And so I think, having her support also really helped me be able to she let me end it on my terms,
Mhm.
which was
Yeah.
cool. Like I came to the
Right.
conclusion. It was like she knew
Not pressured
before I
or
did.
anything.
Yeah, yeah. But I think it was like, man, I got to have some self-awareness here, and this is over. But the scary thing is like now what? That was the hardest part. Is like it wasn't even that I like when I knew it was over. It's like, man, what am I going to do now? Because I've invested so much into this,
Mhm.
and now it's just done.
Mhm. Did you have a feeling of loss of identity? You talked about that a little bit before, but did it hit you really hard when you decided to stop? Okay, the good thing is that you stopped on your own terms. It was your decision.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
did you have that kind of depression, if for lack of a better word, that wow, it's over now?
Yeah, but I don't think it hit initially, right? I think initially it was like it was so that was like February. Like I think my last game I played was like February 1st ish,
Hmm.
and then I was an agent March 1st,
Wow.
right? So like I'm calling people and being like, "Hey, I'm an eight." They're like, "What, dude? You just weren't you just playing?" Like,
I just saw your name on Eurobasket.
yeah, they're like, "What? What?" Um, and it was like right after it would have been like right after like a FIBA window too.
Right.
So like funny enough, where like people were like, "Wait, like, I thought you
Hmm.
maybe were just home because you were home." Um, and so I think I dove so much into being an agent that like I really wasn't thinking about not playing. But then I think once it got to be August, September, when usually you're packing up and you're
Going
going and,
over,
and
yeah.
you see all your former teammates or
Right.
friends, it was like, man. And then, you know, the agent side of it is a grind,
Yeah.
right? So like I'm just trying to make ends meet,
Hmm.
and it wasn't as exciting as it probably was that like first week or
Hmm.
first month or 2 months, right? Because you're kind of just like riding the wave of this new thing, and then you're like, all right, like this is really my life. Like I'm not a basketball player anymore. Like I'm not waking up and having to go to the gym. I'm not
Hmm.
waking up and focusing on how I'm going to get better at this skill set. But yeah, it was hard because it's just like you're so used to that, and now you're on this new thing, and you kind of feel like, man, I'm starting all over.
Yeah. Yeah. I personally didn't have that because I literally went from one day to the next from player to coach, literally in the middle of a season in the German first league. So and I mean like player head coach of
Head
the same team I
coach.
just played for that I was and it's
Wow.
halfway through the season. Crazy story. But so I didn't have that kind of fall off because I was jumping right into coaching. So I didn't really have that, but I know a lot of people who have felt that loss of identity, and it's a serious thing. Um,
Hmm.
and I know a lot of people are now going to get help for that.
Hmm.
Also, before they stop playing, mental health it's a serious thing, and I think it's not talked about enough how much of a identity crisis that former athletes go through. But what I want to ask you next is, so you are an NBA certified agent and a FIBA agent.
Hmm.
What is it like maneuvering between those two worlds? Because I mean, it's two totally different worlds. How do you maneuver through those two worlds and service your players that obviously the ones that are NBA talents, they have a different they're I don't want to say better, but they're in a better position.
Hmm.
Um, and then you have your European clients who all probably want to get back to the NBA or
Yeah.
get to the NBA. How do you maneuver those two totally different worlds?
Yeah. It's like you said, they're totally different, but then they're interconnected. So I think one of the advantages is like having played in Europe, have an understanding of how all the pieces work together, right? The coach, the culture, the club, are you getting paid on time? Like being able to tell guys what they're getting themselves into is where I think a lot of American agents misstep, where they're so reliant upon their
Partners.
partners.
Yeah.
And it's taken me a long time. I started off where I had like almost like a partner in every country, and then like I've slowly kind of just whittled it down to where I really have just like one group, and then you have like certain countries where it's like I have somebody that's going to consult there or work there because I just think you have to have it that way.
Mhm.
But I'm also not removing myself from the process.
Right.
So, I'm talking to the teams as well, and there's a lot of trust built into that too. So it's like I'm fortunate that I have that
Mhm.
partnership, because it allows me, because I think when players like when they're not they see themselves as like that their pathway is not the NBA,
Mhm.
then like they're more likely to end up with a European agent anyway. So like if you're an American agent and you're trying to piece it together, I think it becomes a bit more difficult, and I don't think that it's advantageous to the player. So like, I mean, I had, a former partner where we would argue about this all the time. It was like you could go direct, do this deal direct. I said, yeah, do this deal direct, and then this one with a partner, and this like at some point, it's like you have to have some people that you trust that are
Right.
then feeling like, "Oh, I'm going to go see this player. They have ownership over it, right?" Because the thing that I always thought was backwards was like a guy would help you get a job in a certain country, help your player get him, and then he's making whatever 60, he's in Pauk, and then he kills, and now all of a sudden, back in the day, he's going to Russia or he's going somewhere else because he killed Champions League or whatever, and now it's like, oh, well, I'm gonna do this deal direct,
Alone.
or I'm
Mhm.
gonna do
Yeah.
it with my other partner. It just didn't seem like fair,
Mhm.
right? Like, why would we not continue to work on this together? And if you need three people, let's split it. Let's figure out how to make it work for everybody.
Mhm.
And I think that there's a lot of greed in this business. So people are like, well, if I can do this direct, I'm doing it, and they justify it in their mind. But what's happened now is now my partners in Europe are now sending me players, right? So and especially now in the NIL world, we could have
Right.
never anticipated that the NIL would be this way.
Right.
Now they're sending players here, and we're doing NIL deals, and it's on the same trust basis
Mhm.
as I've extended to them. Um, and I think, look, dealing overseas, I tell this to people all the time, is much harder than the NBA. Just because the NBA it's very boilerplate. You have your CBA, you have your
Rules.
rules.
Right. Yeah.
If I want to go look up how much somebody's making in the
Yeah.
NBA, I can get on the internet and look
Right.
it up. Like to represent guys overseas, like you've got to know the market, you got to know the teams, you've got to know what they pay, you got to know, because that's the place where like you don't want your guy sitting in the locker room being like, how much? Wait, how much? And we know that like half guys lie about how
They
much they're
lie.
making
They
anyway,
lie.
but they
Yeah.
lie. But
They lie.
but I think you have to understand the nuances. There's a lot more depth to it, and that exists in the NBA. But again, in the NBA, it's like if a team wants to cut you, the tactics that they go to overseas versus in the NBA, they just cut you and pay. You're guaranteed your money. You have a strong players union.
Right.
Like there's just like certain things like that. But like dealing with overseas teams and that aspect, definitely has its challenges. And I think you have to know your stuff.
Hmm. Yeah. you brought up something really quick that I want to touch on. You said that a lot of players then end up with a European agent anyway. So of course, what I do is I educate players on the markets and everything
Yeah.
going on. And one of the things that I advise a lot of the American ones are is the same thing. Like, why not have a European agent if that's where you want
Mhm.
to go? If you want to go to Latin America, why not have a Latin American
Yeah.
agent? You know, so you cut out the middleman. I mean, this is nothing against American agents, but I don't know that many American agents that are flying over, going having coffee with a manager from Milan, then flying over having a coffee with a guy in Austria, um, and really making those connections. Yes, you can do it over the phone now with
Yep.
Skype and stuff like that for sure, no question. But um, it's like, why have a guy that ends up splitting the commission, but that agent also has players. So he might have the same player, that European agent might have the same player as you know,
Hmm.
same type of player, but he's getting a full commission.
Yeah.
So, and on this one, he's only getting half because he's working with his partner agent in the States. So who do you think he's going to push the job for? You know?
100%. Yeah.
And that has absolutely no knock on American agents, not at all. But it's kind of like, yeah. I mean, if you're going to try to get in the G League, definitely get yourself an American agent. So it works that way as well,
Yeah.
I think.
No, and that's the thing is like I had to figure that out, and I'm glad like you have to have it has to be there has to be like reciprocation, right? And so like NIL has changed that, but
Yeah.
also it's like so the partners that I work with, like a group called Tangram, and it's like they want to get players to the NBA. They want to be able to
Mhm.
recruit. So I help them by being able to say, "Hey, I have NBA players."
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
a guy, and so their struggle is that they're going, and if they're trying to recruit a guy that's playing on Euro Cup, Euro League level, those guys aren't necessarily looking to go to the NBA, but they want to know that it's a possibility.
Right.
And if they don't
Right.
have NBA clients, so that's where I come in and I'm saying, hey, listen, I can help manage both sides of things. Like summer league, you want to do training camp, like if that becomes the pathway. And so players feel like players want to know that you can represent the ceiling, even if they know they're not going there,
Uh-huh.
right? They just want to know, they want to have that safety of well, if I did want to go one day. And I think they go hand in hand too, where it's like I was explaining this to a player the other day. He was like, I don't want to go overseas. I was like, well, don't say that. I said, my job is to not canvas the market and see, because number one, I may bring you an opportunity that you want. Number two is that if I come back to a team, an NBA team, and say you've got a EuroLeague offer. If I'm telling them Olympia, like I had this one year where Olympiacos offered one of my guys. He didn't want to take the deal. I said, cool, but now I can go back to this NBA team and say
And
we've got an
leverage.
offer from Olympiacos,
Right.
and they're going to be like, oh, this is
Right.
real. I said that because that offer in their minds, in a basketball minds, is like you could argue is better than a back end of the bench NBA job,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I said, look, if you went and played for Olympiacos, you wouldn't be cutting yourself out of the NBA. Like honestly, like I've had guys, Jay Sean Tate being the best success story where it's like they started their careers and come back. Because sometimes I'll tell guys, hey, it's better for you to not be in the G League. It's better for you to start building in Europe, and then let's try to make a run at this NBA thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're at a certain level in Europe, you're getting evaluated by decision makers more than if you're in the
Good
most of the time in the
point.
G League,
Good point.
because and so like guys don't understand, they think they're failing by having to
Yeah.
go overseas, and I'm like,
NBA or
no, listen,
bust.
NBA or bust. Like I have a guy playing EuroLeague this year who's been in the NBA, and it's like the thing to him was like our goal is still the NBA,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like if you go and play well in the EuroLeague, you now have
Right.
options, right? You may not want to come back to the NBA,
Mm-hmm.
or it gives us leverage to get more money or more guaranteed money. So now if you're coming back to the NBA and I tell the team, hey, he's got a EuroLeague guaranteed offer, they know they have to bring me something
Right.
of equal value. And if they don't want to do that, then it's like, cool, you've just revealed that you don't really like the player that much. And that's where players got to understand that like options create leverage.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's a deal that you think is not at the same level, like it makes people give the truth. And like that's my job as an agent, right? Is to get the teams to give me as much truth and information as possible. And if you have options, that's usually when you're going to get the most information from all parties.
That's a good point. Really good point. Um, what? Let me ask you a question. Um, I deal with a lot of players that have had gap years or didn't have an agent coming out or what for whatever reason they haven't played in a while. Um, the question that a lot of people ask me is doing something better than doing nothing. So, for example, I go play in Mexico, even though Mexico is maybe not the highest valued league in Europe. Basically, Europe sniffs
Mm.
their nose at anything Latin America. But I go to Mexico and have great stats there, which are highly inflated usually. Um, is it better for a player that doesn't have an agent, doesn't have someone behind him to do something like that than to have a gap year and do nothing?
Yeah. I mean, it's so hard because when you do that right, you brand yourself. And the way that the European basketball process works is that if you go to them about a player and you say, "Oh, he played in the Copa," immediately they're thinking he's not good enough. Right? That's not our level.
Yeah, yeah.
I always say I'd be an unbelievable European GM because some of these teams, I'm like, this guy's really good. Like, I don't know what you're missing here. But I would say yeah, and then I would say you have to be willing to get creative. Like, there has to be a level of like I always tell people there has to be like a healthy balance of self awareness and confidence,
Mhm.
right? So if I had a kid and he was debating whether to go to the SIBA Copa or to not play at all, let's say for example, no
Mhm.
disrespect to the SIBA Copa, I would say go play, and then at least you have film, at least you have
Mhm.
something. When they go in Eurobasket, it doesn't say that you haven't played for a
Right.
year. It's like at least there's
Mhm.
stats. Now those stats need to be really, really good. And then maybe there's a situation where I could go to a team and say, hey, listen, I believe in him. Why don't we do a 1 month? Why don't we do a 1 month tryout? Why don't we do a 2 month tryout? Why don't we do something to where, like, if I'm right,
You got yourself a hell of a
it's good
player.
for both of us, right? If I'm
Mhm.
wrong, then you guys can move off of him. And then I tell the player, I'm like, and then at least you're in Europe, right? Because now I can call around and say the team's releasing you. Well, he's there. He's
He's
in
there. Yeah.
Germany. He's in
You
Finland.
can always find something
He's
being there.
here. He can be there
Right.
in
Right.
a second, let him come in and practice.
Mhm.
Let him. Do you mind having him for a week or two, just to see how he is as a person and have him in the club and practice. Or again, injuries happen, right? So you're like, hey, I got a player who's available right now who you could plug in and play immediately.
Mhm.
And it's not great when you have to kind of like piece those things together, but I mean that's really where you have to, like, as an agent, work around the edges and get your guy opportunity. And then what they do with that opportunity, right,
Right.
is on them.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I think a great example of that is I have a player who's playing for Vef Riga right now, but he had a gap year because of injury, and so he had to go back. He had an offer from Horsens in Denmark to go back, but he had already played there. He had already killed the Danish league. He had the
Mhm.
gap year, and I said, look, if you don't take this deal, you're basically done. I said, it sucks. The money sucks. It sucks that you have to go back there, but this opportunity exists because they know you,
Right.
because you've been there, and they know
Right.
the value that they're getting out of
Right.
you. And I'll put a buyout in there. Like, we'll work some things in there. So, like, if you're killing by a certain point, we'll put a small buyout in there so that someone could come and buy you out. So he ends up having an MVP season, and now he's playing Champions League for Vef Riga,
Mhm.
right? But it's like if he hadn't made that move, then I don't know. I don't know. I told him. I always tell guys, if we say no to a deal, I don't know if we don't
Right.
have something else. I don't know. I cannot promise you that something better is going to come. What I
Mhm.
can promise you is, so I always try and take. If a guy doesn't want a deal, I try and hang on to that deal as long as possible until another one comes. So you almost have a deal on the table at all times
Mhm.
until the one that you want to be able to take.
Great
But
strategy.
agents will hurt players more than they will help them because they'll be like, "Oh, I'll get something better. I'll turn it down."
Mhm.
And it's like you really got to know what the probability of that is, and it's like the player has to know that. So you got to be able to say to the player, "Hey, there's probably a 10% chance that you're going to get a better offer." And if they say, "Hey, I'm willing to roll the dice," I'll take that. I'll take the chance that it's only 10% that something better is going to come, and that way, when it ultimately doesn't happen, it's like you made the decision as a partners.
Mhm. I I I want to know how the game, since you've been an agent, how the agent game has changed. Because from my side, I'm glad I'm old and I retired a long time ago, and that I'm not trying to get a job now, because I think the
Mm-hmm.
market is incredibly watered down. There's just way too many players for the amount of jobs. When I came out, nobody really wanted to go overseas. So it
Mm-hmm.
was kind of like, if you went overseas, you were really good.
Yeah.
Now it's like everybody has a chance to go overseas. There's a lot more leagues, things like that. But how has the agent game changed in the time that you've been an agent? Has it become more competitive or more cutthroat, or how do you see it?
I'd say both. Say more competitive and more cutthroat. And a lot of it is like it's not. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I started this series is because it's hard to know what a good agent is,
Yep.
because
I got.
a lot of
I
it
have my
is.
thoughts on that. I'll tell you
Yeah,
after
I
you
mean,
finish.
well, I mean, but
You
so
no, you go ahead and
but
finish,
so
and I'll tell you my thought on that.
but so much of it is that so much of it is around money, and it doesn't mean just like paying a player, right? It means a lot of guys, the first question they ask you, and they could be like honestly, they could be like a pro A German level player probably as a rookie, and they're like, where am I pre-drafting? Who's doing my pre-draft? Who's doing? It's like, well, look, I'm going to do everything I can to get you workouts. I'm going to use my relationships. I'm going to use your proximity to certain cities. But like, what are we pre-drafting for? Right? Like, pre-draft is pre-NBA draft. So it's like if you're not willing to spend during that period, like you're not even getting that guy. But then if you get that guy, you're also from a business standpoint losing in the short term because you're not making that money back in commissions. It's going to take you probably 1, 2, 3 years to get that money back,
Right.
which is why um, I hate using the term like poaching or stealing or whatever. We're talking about like human beings here,
Mhm.
right? But it's like nobody owns any of these players. So like as an agent, you represent them, and players are free to make whatever decision they want to make. Whether you think it's right, whether you think it's wrong, whether it's based on good information, bad information, it's a player's game. It's just how it is. But that's why I think going and trying to recruit other established guys is so, because from a business standpoint, it's like I can get this guy, invest almost really nothing,
Right.
and they're not expecting pre-draft, they're not anything. They're 3, 4 years into their career, and I know that I'm guaranteed X amount of commission. I'm gonna be able to flip this guy and get this guy a deal. And I always explain to players like you got to be really careful. Like they need to have like a very detailed plan, and like they need to be able to articulate what they can actually do that your agent's not doing, or identify something. Like so when I have a conversation with a player that's looking to change agents, I want to first understand why are you getting rid of
Why are
your
you
old
leaving?
agent?
Yep.
Because
Yep.
I
You
might
don't
be
want
just
those problems.
inherit I don't yeah, you may be just inheriting problem. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so and I'll tell guys, and some guys are like, wait, what? I was like, yo, your agent did a good job. And they're like, huh? And I'm like, yeah, that's what I would want. If a player was meeting with an agent and you told me all these things, I'd say you need to stay with your agent. He's doing a good job. Now, if I see that he's not doing a good job, or you got sent out on an email list with 100 other names with no kind of detail, right? Then let's have a conversation. Like let's talk about strategy. Let's talk about how are you seen in the European world. Um, could you have a shift? Do you need a change of scenery? Is this a good league for you? Like let's have a real conversation about that. And if you're not getting this from me, cool. Let's have a conversation. If I can do better or provide more value, I would love to help you. That's why I'm in this business.
Right. Right. I have a theory based on my own personal story. I broke my leg my first year overseas. I was in Austria for like 2 months, and I broke my leg. And I always tell players that I advise now, you don't really know if you have a good agent until one of two things happens, and they're both bad. You get
Yeah.
hurt or you
Yeah.
get fired.
Yeah.
That's when you
Yeah.
know how good your agent is.
Yeah.
The finding you a job, placing you somewhere, negotiating a contract, that's pretty much everyday business for most agents. But those unexpected things, fired or hurt, then you know how well your agent's connections are, how they take care of their injured or fired players. Did they already know that the firing was going to come and already react to
Mhm.
that? Usually agents know if a guy's about to get fired, right? And okay, did he react? Is he searching for other teams? Is he, And I think that's for sure not the only way you know if you have a good agent or not. But in those times of crisis, is when you really see, okay, this guy is for me.
Mhm.
He's looking out for my best interests and not that of the team. And
Yeah.
that's a huge thing because I've seen deals made in the interest of the team where the guy is literally flying home with a band-aid on his leg and his leg is twisted to the side. But because the agent wants to continue doing work with
Yeah.
that team, he'll
Yeah.
sacrifice the player because anyway he's hurt. He's going to be out
Yeah.
for a year and a half. So they don't make up as a good of a buyout as what actually is necessary. So that's my kind of theory, and I just wanted to throw
No,
that out at you because
no, and you're right. I mean, you don't know until you
you don't
know.
know until you know.
And unfortunately, it's when it's not, it's never, it's usually never like a good time. Like it's not
Mm-hmm,
like something positive is happening
mm-hmm,
because you really need an eight. That's when you need an agent. Like I didn't,
mm-hmm.
when things are going well, you don't need an
Yeah,
agent, right? Like you need
yeah,
the agent. You need the agent to be able to capitalize on whatever you've done or production you've
mm-hmm,
done. But it's like, yeah, when you really find out, like character wise, work wise, um, who's representing you in those moments, and that's the hardest part of art of my job is because when you're trying to like articulate that to players, right? The way players are wired, like they're always thinking the best case scenario, and
yeah,
if you try and like put a range of things like worst case scenario. I always tell people like there's a worst case scenario and there's a best case scenario, and it more than likely is going to fall somewhere in between there. And we want it to be closer to the best case scenario.
mm-hmm,
Um, and so, how can we mitigate risk? What are some things that we can do? What's controllable? What's uncontrollable? Um, and it's like, but this is not how we're wired. Like me too. Like you don't. I'm going into every game thinking I'm gonna make every shot. I'm gonna
mm-hmm,
play the best. Never thinking I'm gonna have a bad game. Um, I'm never going into a situation thinking I'm not gonna do well. Or I'm not gonna kill. And so like that's the hardest part is when you're trying to say, hey, like you really can't lead with that because then the player's like, oh, you don't believe in me, or like you
right,
don't think I'm gonna
right,
be good. And
right.
so then this other guy told me
I'm
that
great.
I'm great, and then you're
Yeah,
like, you are, but majority of players need good agents. There's some, especially in the NBA, where it's like there's a max
yeah,
contract. Max is a max. Like if you're a max player, like you're getting a max contract, and you can go look at some of the guys that are making the most money in the NBA, and they're represented. They may be represented by, it's like if you look KD, Kawhi, Jimmy Butler, like they're represented by agents that have Kyrie Irving, like they're represented, Jason Tatum. These guys are all represented by agents that have less than five
mm-hmm,
clients, and some of them just one,
mm-hmm,
right?
yeah,
Like, and so why is that? Well, why do they not need the quote unquote big agency, right? It's because the power and leverage comes from who? The player.
mm-hmm,
And so each situation I go into with a player, the amount of power and leverage I have is based on who I'm negotiating on behalf of.
right,
And now there's ways to work the edges similar to the story that I put up. Like there's things that agents should be doing and being proactive and looking for every single opportunity. And I always tell players is like the worst things I'll ask. I'm gonna ask. The worst thing someone can say is no.
no,
Maybe they say yes.
yeah,
Um, but that is the unfortunate reality. And then as an agent, I'll have guys come back to me and they'll be like, "Man, you were right. Like I'm ready to work with you." And I'm like, "Dang, like I don't know that I want to work with you anymore. Like you didn't,
yeah,
you
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
listen. You didn't listen to me, and now it's like now I've got to like fix. Now I'm a
right,
fixer. Like and I there's one part of me that like really embraces that and is proud of that.
mm-hmm,
But then there's like another part of me that's like, whew, like this is this is tough.
mm-hmm,
When I just had this recently, fortunate to sign a player that had been, spent many years in the NBA. And so I was explaining to him from a strategy standpoint, I was like, I can't pick up the phone and call all these teams and tell them why they should sign you or who you are because they all know you,
mm-hmm,
right? They've been evaluating you for, at this point, 7 to 9 years,
Mhm.
right? And they have their minds made up.
Mhm.
I have to ask the right questions. That's what my job is here, is to ask the right questions so that they're giving me good information, because good information comes from the 30 NBA teams. That's who's signing the contracts, not me, not your mom, not your girlfriend. Like, it's the team. So if they think one thing, we have to figure out why they think that. Can we fix it? And how can I stay in touch with
Mhm.
them? Meaning, like, if they tell me, hey, we need a guy who's switchable, that can guard multiple positions or whatever, you don't call them after you don't call them up and say, hey, I got a guy. You call them and say, hey, listen, I remember you said that you were looking for this profile. My guy, would you mind going and watching these last two games, like, and just giving me your expert opinion
Mhm.
on what you
That's
think? I mean, I
that's
think
dope.
that
That's dope.
that's the approach you have to have. And then they're like, okay, like, let me go and take a look and watch it, and then you give them space for them to come to the conclusion. Because if you try and tell a
Mhm.
general manager what to do, they're one of 30 jobs in the whole world. They're making a bunch of money. They didn't get there by accident,
Mhm.
and they're not going to respond well to that. I don't care who the agent is.
Mhm.
Like, they know immediately that you're biased when you step into that
Of course.
conversation. They
Of
got a
course.
wall up immediately.
Mhm.
They're saying he's calling me, he wants something, he needs something. So you have to approach it in a way where it's like, you know, they are the ones, they have the
It's their
space to make that
idea.
this, yes, it's
Mhm.
their idea, but they
Mhm.
have to have the room to do that, because in this business, everybody is wired to be like, to cross names off a list. There's so many players,
Mhm.
right? And they're trying to juggle and manage, and they're trying to find the diamond in the rough, and they're trying to identify who could help their team at the end of the day. And it's like, you have to be able to. So if a guy tells me, hey, we're looking for a center, and I'm like, well, I got this great point guard, you know, they'll be like, dude, they don't want to answer my, they don't want to, but
Yeah.
I'm doing a disservice to all my players
Everyone.
now, because they don't, nobody wants to answer the phone
Right.
anymore. Like, I tell people, well, how did you get, so, like, number one, my dad was in the sports world, right? So, like, I had a head start in relationships. I had people that I could call immediately when I was done as a player and say, hey, can you help connect me? But then the next way I did it was, I would call people in front offices and be like, "Hey, I I could help you with this, or an evaluation of this, or I know this about this player, or know this about that player." And so now they were like, "All right, this guy's calling me, and he's not asking for something, like, he's providing
Offer.
value, right?
Right.
And how much value, I don't know, but I mean, that's how I started off building. I had this self-awareness to know, look, this guy's not an NBA player, but if I can find ways to help these guys or to bring value, they're more likely to pick up the phone. And then when I
Mhm.
do have a player that's worthy of summer league or a workout, I would
They're
they would
receptive.
imagine it gives me a better
Right.
chance, right? Of
Right.
of of them being like, yeah, you know what, we'll bring the guy in for a
Mhm.
workout.
Mhm. I only got a couple more questions for you, man.
Yeah.
I don't want to keep you too long. Um, of course, now you have a nice stable of players and a very diverse player roster, but it probably wasn't always like that. And what I want to know is, first of all, how many emails do you get from players every day that are looking for representation? I've got a follow up question for that.
Oh man. I mean, now it's like the email has become the DM. But I
Yeah.
would say, like, it's a couple a week, right? I would say, like, early on, I probably got a lot more.
Mhm.
Um, and I always would try, and if I could, like, help in any way. Um, and it's hard too, because you see an email that comes through that looks a lot like an email that you sent once upon a time. And kind of like, man, the odds are stacked so high against this guy. Like, I don't know what to tell him or what to do,
Sometimes
because
you
it's
can
like,
feel that hunger too, and that's hard.
yeah, it's
That's
really
hard.
hard, because it's like,
Yeah.
there's not, I don't know, it's just like, to get a job, like, in some of these instances, even if you watch the film, it's like, and then these camps, these rip-off camps,
Oh,
like, I don't even want to get you started
yeah,
on that, but
yeah,
it's like, then that's the hard part too, because these guys are like, oh, well, I'm going to
yeah.
this camp or that camp, and I'm like,
Uh,
well,
that's not it.
you can't, you can't, like, and then like the really good camps are like harder to get into. You know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
hard when it's like I tell guys like to get opportunity. I mean, you almost have to just like show up places
yeah,
to a certain
yeah.
extent.
I tell people that
Um,
too.
so
Okay, so I deal with a lot of, like I said, a lot of players that don't have agents, and I
mhm.
advise them. What's the best advice you can give to a player who doesn't have an agent, whether because of gap years or whatever? But the best advice you can give to a player that doesn't have an agent that's reaching out to agents to try to find one.
So what I learned is when I was doing this on my own was at first I would send pretty much like blanket emails, like the old like BCC. It was like, "Hi, my name is EJ Kushner. I'm 6'5". I weigh two, and like the response was like, I'm not getting many responses.
Right.
So I was like, okay, and this takes a lot more time. And so I remember this. I would come home because there was a stretch where like I was not playing, but I was like working at a restaurant. I'd come home from my like night shift waiting tables, and I would go like I'd do like 2 or 3 leagues a night, and I'd go through, I'd look for the information, I'd look to see if I could find them, their email. Now, I mean, everybody has a LinkedIn,
Yeah.
Facebook,
Right.
Instagram. It's so
Mhm.
much easier to find people now.
Yeah.
And then I looked for very specific things, or if I could find a game, I would go and watch a game, even if it was a quarter, and just be like, "Hey, coach," and I would put in the title line something very specific, something like, you know, uh, great shooter for your 5-out offense. I don't
Yeah.
know, like something
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
something
Something.
like that, to where like
Mhm.
if the coach got it, their chances of opening the email and reading it
Yeah.
were going to be way higher, because they were like, this person took time to
Yep.
know, at least they know we have a
Yep.
5-out offense,
Yep.
or it could be even
He
something
knows something
personal.
about me.
Yeah, know something about me,
He's
like if the
talking directly to me. He's not, it's not the
yes,
mass email that you're sending out to everyone. It is
yes,
directed personally towards me. I am so thankful that you just said that, because in my consultations, anybody that's watching, they know that that's part of
yeah,
my thing, what I advise people to do. And it takes a lot more work.
yeah,
It definitely takes a lot more work. You have to do some investigating. You have to research and see something. But one of the things I tell them is, hey, if you're writing to an agent, you have to know what kind of players he has on his roster, and
hmm,
mention something about that, or mention something about the type of player, or I know
yes,
this guy, or something like that, so that they understand that you are talking directly to them and not
yep,
to the 150 other agents that you're probably going to write.
yep,
It takes
yeah.
9
No,
million emails
for
before
sure.
someone.
Because some agents don't, like, my strategy was like I had like an agent in like every country, but there were some agents that like had a problem with it, right? They were like, "Well, I saw that, this guy's doing he's
Right,
doing," and I'm like, "Yeah, but like, there's a guy in Iceland, Siggy, right? Like he did all the deals in Iceland." So I was like, "Yeah, if there's a deal in Iceland, like he's gonna know that it's there."
right,
But it's like if there's a deal in like Portugal, like you're doing the deal. Like I'm giving you this, and I'm not a good enough player where it's like it's not like I'm gonna sign with Bayern Munich and you're gonna be like mad about
right.
it. Like I'm gonna sign for like 1,500, 2,000 a month, and it's like we're talking about, and if you need the money or whatever, we can work something out there too, to where it's like your work is compensated. Like
Right.
I'm here to work with you, but yeah, guys don't want to know that's happening, because also the other to go a little further on that too is like they're also like, all right, I'm skeptical of this person, because now if I reach out to a team and I think I can get him a job, there might be five other
Other, right,
agents who are also reaching out to the team,
right.
and then the guy's not going to get the job because the team's going to be like, this is unprofessional. We're
As
not.
soon
This is a
as
bad look.
teams smell agents beef, oh, they'll drop you like a hot rock.
Super fast. I mean, funny story. I had a player who I got a deal from in Spain. Really good player, like legitimately fringe NBA. So I get
Mhm.
him this deal in ACB, and I'm like, yeah, like I'm like really feeling myself. And the team's like, look, man, like you're one of 4 agents who
Wow.
have, proposed this. We don't know who to give the contract to or
Mhm.
whatever.
Mhm.
So like whoever can produce the agent agreement. I'm like, oh, these other 3 agents, I'm about to get this win here because I got my agent agreement with the player. All 4 agents sent all four all four agents had agent agreements. So the team obviously was like, we're not signing this guy.
Yeah,
And also it's like guys don't realize like you know that goes to FIBA. You're talking about a ban suspension for a period of time.
yeah.
And I'm like, dude, what are you doing?
And it also hurts the agent because now the team doesn't want to deal
Well,
with
you
that
look like
agent because
an idiot. You look like an
yeah,
idiot.
yeah,
Meanwhile, I'm thinking, yeah, okay, yeah, I
right,
got the paperwork. I
right.
got my ducks in a row. I'm gonna show you like I'm on top of it. And
Mhm.
then yeah, so so these other three guys, they come back to me like, yeah, great, thanks for this, but also, the other three also submitted
Wow.
this. So I'm like, geez,
Wow. Okay, man, I got one more question for you.
cool.
Knowing what you know now, talking to yourself coming out of college,
Mhm.
what would be one thing you would tell yourself as a player? One thing that you would tell yourself maybe to prepare you better for Europe or something that you would definitely tell yourself back then.
Yeah, don't get hung up on the little things. Like keep the big picture in mind and know that like in order to get to step two, you got to get through step
Yeah.
one. And to not to have to be self-aware, be appreciative, understand what you have.
Mm,
Because I didn't understand what I have until I didn't. And I remember I was in Rotterdam in the Netherlands and I remember sitting looking out into the, one of the beautiful whatever ship ways
mm,
or ship channel,
mm.
whatever. I was sitting there on the
Yeah.
water and I remember thinking like, what did I do? What did I just do? Like I'm not at practice. My teammates are at practice. I don't have another team to go to. I'm gonna go move with my team, college teammate, live with him in Belgium and practice with his team. But like, what did I do? And I remember calling my wife and being like, what did I do? And she's like, yeah, what did you do? Like I don't know why. Like she's like, I was always so confused, but you were so fired up and so like passionate, and emotional, and so it's like I would say be unoffendable. I would tell hey, be unoffendable
Mm,
and like control what you can control and just go
mm,
hoop. Just go hoop and
yeah.
everything will take care of itself
Yeah.
and just get through it. And I wish I would and listen to people that have been there
Mm,
and that have the wisdom because I had a teammate and I remember him being like, dude, it's not really a good idea. And I'm like, well, I was so, but again, like I was too far gone
mm,
as far as like, well, this and that. And I was worried about all the wrong things instead of
right.
just hooping. And I felt like, well, I'm leading the team in scoring. Like, I'm like, I feel like I'm the best player on this team. And it's like, no, dude, you actually have zero leverage. They will replace you in a second. And they had
Yeah.
no problem doing that.
Yeah. That's dope. That's a good
Yeah.
point. Okay, man, that's it. I have one final
Ooh.
request. Um, so it's the theme that my current guest gives me a recommendation for a future guest. So anybody in the sports world doesn't even have to be a basketball player. I don't care about that. Somebody that you think might be a good fit, has a good story for this kind of interview that you might want to throw out there. The only trick is not trick, but the side thing is you have to help me get this person
Help
on my show. So
get
there's
you
there's not
on
that
here.
I'm not going to be writing to somebody and they're going to ghost me and then I never hear from them. So you got to try to help me get this person.
Who
It
would
can be a player, it can be a GM, it can be anybody in the basketball world, or not even basketball, just period, sports world, period. I love stories from all different types of sports.
trying to think of guys that have like really like those kind of like grinded out stories.
Oh, those are
I,
always
I'll, I'll get Shannon Shorter. You know who
okay.
Shannon Shorter is?
No,
Um,
the name does sound familiar,
so
but
he's playing in Adriatic League right now, split, but he started off, I think he averaged like 5 or 6 a game at North Texas. I want to say he started his career in like the Ciba Copa. So we talk about the Ciba
okay,
Copa.
okay,
Um, but he's like a Houston legend.
okay.
And I just think it's always good. I guess it's like he's somebody that I would want to hear from if I was a player, right? Because like for
So
me, I
yeah,
always
yeah,
resonated with guys whose story like I could attach
right,
myself to, right? Like, well, he did it.
right,
Like everybody wants to be
right,
able to see that it can be done.
right.
Um, and what was it? I'm gonna mess this up. Was it Roger Bannister broke the 4 minute
Yeah,
mile mark? They always
yeah,
talk about
yeah.
how
It
once
can't be
he
done.
did it, then like
Mhm.
thousands of people did it because it
Right,
was like it in their minds like it couldn't have been done until it was done, and then once it was done, everybody so
Yeah,
many other people were able to do it.
yeah.
So I would say that would be that'd
That's
be a
dope.
super
I'm
cool
with it.
one.
I'm with it. So you're gonna hit him up. You please send me his Instagram, and you're gonna hit him up, and then
All
I'm
right.
gonna hit him up, and then we're gonna get him on. So,
All right.
but
Bet.
EJ, thank you. Actually I could have talked to you. I wanted to talk to you about FIBA rules. I could have gone. I would have been on a tangent, but I appreciate you taking the time out, man, for real, and giving your insight. I didn't even get into the things that you do on your page. So everyone,
Yeah.
please take a look at his page because he gives crazy info on NBA contracts and things how that go that blow my mind that I never even thought about. So if you're interested in those kind of behind the scenes things, what deals go on and things like that, please give him a shout out, look at his page and give him a follow. But man, I really appreciate you coming on and giving your insight. And I thought that was super dope, the interview. And yeah, man, I can't thank
Yeah.
you enough for taking
Yeah.
the
No,
time.
thank you for having it. And thanks for doing what you're doing, So
Yeah, I'm trying my
yeah.
best, man.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
I wish I had Instagram back in 2010, and your page existed. So
Thank you. I appreciate that, man.
all
So
right, man.
go have a good one with your fam, and we'll talk soon anyway.
All right,
All
sounds
right.
good. Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
guy. So everyone, once again, another great interview. I really could have gone on. Now we're an hour in. I promised him like 30 to 45 minutes. I could have gone with about 2 more hours with him. Great guest and a lot of really good insight to how it is as an agent. I also talk a lot about agents. I am not anti-agent at all. I think players need to take a little bit more responsibility and be a little bit more patient at times. But it's always good to hear from an agent from their side of the whole overseas basketball job thing. So that's it for me. I am really thankful for all of you that have been here for the hour and 1 minute that I've been on. Even if you were here just for a 1 minute or 30 minutes or whatever, I'm greatly appreciative. Maybe you'll stop by another day for another guest. Next week, I do not have a show, but the week after that, I have a pretty cool guest. So keep your eyes out on my post to find out who that is. And yeah, I appreciate you all. Thank you. Have a good night. I hope all your families are safe. Hold it out.